Well, hi, welcome to another LRCC Soundbite. We're starting to get towards the end of our walk through the stories of Jesus, recorded by this man called Luke and available for us to read in the Bible. By now, Jesus is in Jerusalem, and there are only days to go before the events that we talked about back at Easter. So in these last few weeks, we'll look at some of the answers that Jesus gave to tricky questions, and also what he said about what would happen in the future. Today, Jesus is asked two questions, both of them designed to try and trick him into giving a bad answer. He would often go to the temple and teach anyone who was around. Now, the temple in Jerusalem, it wasn't like a church that we might recognise. It wasn't a quiet place and cold and empty, or maybe you're used to a warm church, but it wasn't quite like that. It was a huge complex. It had different areas or courtyards. They were separated from each other, and each one of them came closer to the centre where the most holy places were. And each time you moved closer into a new area, fewer people were allowed into those spaces, until in the very centre, only the high priest was allowed to go, and even then, only on one day every year. But the outer courts of the temple were insanely busy. They would be noisy and full of all sorts of people coming to the temple for different reasons. This is the kind of place Jesus would have been in the temple. And on this occasion, a group of important priests and teachers and other leaders came and asked him a question. Jesus, they said, who gave you the authority to teach the things you do? But Jesus answered with another question. He asked them, who gave John the Baptist the right to baptise people? I don't know if you remember him. He was a lot earlier in the story. And people would go, and as a sign of being ready for God, he would dip them into the river, baptise them. Now, this really stumped these teachers and these leaders, because their problem was that John had taught that Jesus was sent by God, and therefore had God's authority. It was also generally believed that John was a prophet of God. But John had also been killed some time before by the king. So they couldn't dishonour his memory or discredit him in some way without causing a public outcry. So they simply answered, we don't know. So Jesus' reply was, well, then I won't tell you either. So next, something else came along, and this question would really get people going. I guess it still gets people going today. It was a question about paying taxes. Jesus was asked whether the people should pay their taxes to the occupying Roman forces. Should they pay taxes to the emperor of Rome? No one liked the Romans. So what was Jesus going to say? Because if he said yes, then he'd show himself to be a collaborator with the Romans and would instantly lose the trust of all the people, and his teaching was finished. If he said no, then they would be able to report him to the Roman authorities as a troublemaker who was trying to incite people to rebel against the Romans and get him arrested. So what was Jesus going to say? Well, he asked to be given a coin. And looking at the coin, he asked the people whose name and face are on it. The answer, of course, was the emperor's. So Jesus told them, give to the emperor what belongs to him, and give to God what belongs to God. What an answer. There was nothing Jesus' enemies could say. They were simply amazed and kept quiet. Now, I think that answer still holds true for us today. What belongs to God, you might ask? Well, as a Christian, I believe that God is the creator of everything. So everything belongs to him, in my view. When I look for some kind of image of that ownership, like the picture of the emperor on the coin, maybe I look at this amazing world, at some of the beautiful places on it, to the sky, to all the stars, to the detail of a flower. I also believe that God asked us to look after this world. How good a job are we doing of that? I mean, that will have to be the subject of another soundbite, but it's worth thinking about. This world of ours is amazing in so many ways, and yet we don't always look after it the way that we probably should, do we? What can we do to change that? What can I do to change that? What can you do to change that? Now, each of us in a small way can do something, but it adds up when we all work together to a bigger thing, doesn't it? God bless you. I'll see you next week.